My name is Robert Stanton. I'm 64 years old. I've driven more miles than I can count, slept in more truck cabs than motel beds, and eaten more gas station sandwiches than I'd ever admit. But none of that haunts me. What always will, is how many miles I let grow between me and my daughter. I wasn't always a trucker. Before that, I was in the Navy. 20 years, structure, discipline, distance, all things I excelled at. I met my wife, Dana, on leave. She was warm, grounded, the kind of woman who brought light into rooms without meaning to. We got married young. She gave me a daughter, Lily. I still remember the way she gripped my finger the first time I held her. Tiny, fragile, mine. When I retired from the Navy, Lily was 4. I thought I was finally going to be home, to make up for the time I'd missed. But life doesn't slow down for anyone. I needed work. We needed money. So I took a job, driving long-haul freight. 2 weeks on the road, 5 days home. Again and again. Until those 5 days started feeling more like interruptions to the rhythm I'd built around absence. Dana and I fought more than we laughed. The strain of me being gone, the reality of raising a child mostly alone, it cracked her. It cracked us. When Lily was 6, we divorced. Quietly. No shouting. No drama. Just paperwork and resignation. Dana got the house, the custody. I got weekends, at least in theory. I still remember the first Saturday I was supposed to pick Lily up after the divorce. My truck had just come in late from Texas, and I was running on 3 hours of sleep. But I showed up. She waited on the front porch, little backpack slung over her shoulder, sparkly pink shoes tapping the step. When she saw me, she smiled so wide I forgot how tired I was. She held out a drawing. "It's you, Daddy, driving the truck. I put hearts so you remember I love you." I still have that drawing, but those weekends didn't last. Work got busier, routes longer. Dana didn't make it easy either. "She's got ballet this weekend," she'd say. Or, "Lily's not feeling well." Some of it was true, some of it wasn't. I didn't push. Maybe I should have. Instead, I mailed gifts. Birthday cards with crisp bills inside. Christmas boxes filled with toys I picked up at truck stops. One time, I found a pink music box shaped like a castle. Thought she'd love it. Never heard back. No thank you, not even a call. But I convinced myself. She knows I care. She knows I'm trying. That was the lie I told myself the longest. When Lily turned 9, I decided I wasn't going to miss her birthday again. I drove 20 hours straight from Montana, skipped sleep, and showed up at Dana's doorstep with a gift and a smile. I had this ridiculous hope in my chest, like maybe we could start fresh. But when Dana opened the door, her face turned to stone. "You didn't call," she said flatly. "I wanted it to be a surprise," I answered stupidly. "She's at a party with her friends. You can't just show up and expect." I brought her a cake. Her favorite. Chocolate with marshmallow. "She doesn't remember that's her favorite," Dana snapped. Then she stepped outside, shut the door behind her, and added, "You're not part of her life anymore, Robert. You gave that up. Don't confuse the past with permission." I stood there, cake in hand, like a fool. I didn't argue, didn't demand to see my daughter. I just nodded, walked back to my truck, and drove off. That was the last time I tried to show up in person, for a long, long time. Years passed. I kept sending cards, kept mailing money. Once, when she was 16, I emailed her a long message. It came back undeliverable. Wrong address. Or maybe blocked. I saw pictures of her sometimes. Dana posted them online. High school graduation, college. I watched her grow up through filtered photos and captions. In each one, she looked a little more like her mother. And I thought, she looks happy. She must be okay. I clung to that because the truth was too painful. The truth was, I'd become a ghost, a name on a check, a man she once knew. They say time heals all wounds. But what they don't say is, time also erases people who don't show up. I told myself Lily was fine. I saw her photos. Dana posted them like little updates to a world I no longer belonged to. There she was at a dance recital, her arm wrapped around two other girls. She smiled wide, teeth showing, cheeks red from movement. Later, I saw her in a cap and gown, flanked by a banner that read, Class of 2012. Another smile, another reason to believe she had everything she needed. That's how I justified the silence. I didn't want to intrude. I figured, if she needed me, she'd reach out. And when she didn't, I filled in the blanks with comfort. She looks happy, I told myself. That's all that matters. The internet was my window into her life. I bookmarked Dana's Facebook page, checked it every few weeks. I never commented, never liked. I wasn't ready for a digital rejection. But the more I watched, the more I believed my absence hadn't left a scar. Because how could it? Look at her. Beaming in a graduation gown, blowing candles on a birthday cake, posing with friends in Central Park. Surely someone hurting wouldn't smile like that. What I didn't see, what I refused to imagine, was what came after the camera clicked. The moments between photos, the quiet. I never saw the loneliness behind her smiles, never heard the silence that followed the parties, never wondered if she looked at her phone, hoping it might buzz, because I didn't call. There were so many days I almost did. I'd sit in the cab of my truck, phone in hand, thumb hovering over her contact. Then I'd freeze. What would I even say? Hi, it's Dad. I know I've missed a few birthdays, a few decades. No, that sounded pathetic. She was probably busy, probably out with friends, or working, or in love. She didn't need her absentee father dragging old guilt into her life. I'd convince myself it was better this way, safer. And every year, when her birthday rolled around, I'd write her name in my planner. I'd even pick out a card, funny but sweet. Sometimes I'd include a gift card to one of those coffee chains I imagined she liked. I never sent them. They stacked in my glove compartment like unopened guilt. I convinced myself that silence was better than clumsy reconnection, that I was protecting her from disappointment by not reminding her I existed. What I didn't know, what no one told me, was that Lily waited. Every year. On her birthday, she'd turn her phone up. She'd make sure the battery was full. She'd keep it close. During lunch, during dinner, even when opening presents, just in case. She never told anyone, not her friends, not Dana. It was a private hope, small, flickering, a maybe. Maybe this year he'll call, and every year, that hope died in silence. Years later, I found that out from someone else, a mutual acquaintance, one I barely remembered from back when Dana and I were together. We ran into each other at a diner outside Kansas City. She recognized me, asked if I ever spoke to Lily. I said no. She nodded slowly. Then, almost in passing, she said, "You know, she used to wait for your calls, especially on her birthdays. Dana never told you?" I shook my head. She stopped saying it out loud after a while, she continued. But the first few years, she'd sit by the phone all day. That night, in the back of my rig, I cried. Not loudly, Not dramatically, just quietly, the kind of tears that burn without falling. I stared at the ceiling of my truck and thought about all the times I thought I was doing the right thing by staying away. The truth was, I stayed away to protect me from rejection, from shame, from having to face the daughter I'd failed. But in trying to shield myself, I'd left her unshielded, exposed, waiting. I think about that now, every time I see a girl her age, every time I pass a high school or hear someone laugh with a voice just a little like hers. She waited for my voice, and I gave her silence. It was a Thursday afternoon in early fall, and the sky had that perfect kind of gray, clouded but calm, like the weather couldn't decide if it wanted to cry. I was passing through Portland, making a short delivery to a warehouse near downtown. My next route didn't start until the following morning, and for once, I had a night to myself. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the rare sense of stillness. But I parked the truck and wandered into the city. No plan, no destination, just moving. A crowd outside a bookstore caught my eye. A banner hung over the door. Local author signing, tonight only. Something about the name made me stop. Lily Stanton. My chest tightened. It wasn't a common name. Not with that spelling. And the photo on the poster. My God. It was her. She was older now, of course. Mid-30s. Her face had lengthened, her cheeks more defined, but the eyes were unmistakable. Dana's eyes. My daughter's eyes. She stood behind a folding table just inside the entrance, signing books, with a polite, rehearsed smile. Her hair was pulled back into a low bun. She wore a blue cardigan, her posture straight, confident, professional. There was no sign of the little girl in sparkly shoes drawing hearts on paper. I watched from across the street, behind a group of parents pushing strollers and sipping coffee. I felt like a trespasser in her world. I could have crossed. I could have walked in, waited in line, and said, "Hi, it's me, your father." But my feet didn't move. My throat tightened. What would I say? "I saw your book. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry." None of it felt right. None of it would change the years I'd been gone. So I stood there, just long enough to see her look up from her book and laugh at something a reader said. She laughed like she meant it. I turned away. That night, I sat in my truck cab, staring at my phone. I typed the message a dozen times before sending it. "Dad saw you that day. Are you still well?" It felt small, weak, but it was all I had. She didn't reply right away. I wasn't expecting her to. I figured she might ignore it altogether. But 2 days later, as I parked at a rest stop in Northern California, my phone buzzed. One new message. "Whatever you need to say it here. Don't try to show up again." I read it 3 times before the meaning settled in. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was cold, final, like a door closing quietly but firmly. I tried to imagine her face when she typed it. Was she irritated, hurt, exhausted? Or was I just a footnote now, something she tolerated like a spam call? I didn't respond. I couldn't. What could I possibly say? She was right. I had just shown up. No warning, no invitation. Like I still had the right to appear and disappear at will. And I suppose some part of me believed I did. That being her father still granted me something, anything. But that message shattered the illusion. She didn't want me near her life, not even as a background presence. I wasn't someone she thought of with warmth. I was someone she'd rather forget. Or maybe someone she never really got to know in the first place. And for the first time, I started to understand that this wasn't just about missed birthdays or late cards. This was about absence that became a personality. Mine. This was about a child growing up feeling invisible to the one person she should have never had to chase. And now she wasn't chasing anyone. She'd built her own life. She was an author. She had readers who waited for her words. She had a life that didn't need me crashing into it like a truck skidding on a wet highway. But what broke me most wasn't the rejection. It was the realization that she was doing just fine without me, and that I didn't know the woman she had become. I hadn't earned the right to. I remember sitting in the cab that night, staring out into a parking lot lit by yellow floodlights, and thinking, she laughed. Back at that book signing, she laughed, and not in a forced way. Not in a way that suggested pain lurking behind the smile. She laughed like someone who'd learned to be okay. And I was the one left behind. Not because she walked away, but because I never bothered to take the steps forward in the first place. It came through a mutual friend. Her name was Sandra, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but who'd remained loosely tethered to both my life and Dana's. She ran into me at a small grocery store off Route 40, somewhere in Nevada. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, the awkward, "I didn't know you still lived" types of comments. Then she said, "Congratulations, Grandpa." I blinked. "I'm sorry." Lily. She had a baby, a little girl, just last week. It took me a moment to register the words. I felt winded, like someone had punched me square in the chest. A granddaughter. My first thought wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the bridge I hadn't been able to build for 30 years. A baby had a way of softening people, of making them rethink old walls, of starting something new. I drove through the night in a haze of thought. I didn't even notice when I crossed state lines. When I stopped at a roadside diner for coffee, I found myself scribbling names on a napkin. Lila, May, Catherine. None of them stuck. I had no idea what she'd named her, but I wanted to know. More than that, I wanted to be part of it. Back at my truck, I dug through the glove compartment and found the old tin box I kept with me. It was dented, scratched, but intact. Inside were faded photographs, mostly of Lily. Her at 4, holding a dog. Her at 6, asleep in a car seat. Her at 7, standing on a stool next to me in a cluttered kitchen, stirring batter in a bowl. That last one, that was the one I chose. I cleaned the tin the best I could, wrote a short note. "I heard you're a mom now. I thought you might want to show her this someday. Love, Dad." I mailed it the next morning. No return address. Just her name and the publisher's office where she sometimes worked. For the next 3 days, I waited. I checked my phone too often. Told myself I wasn't expecting anything, that this was just a gesture, a peace offering. But deep down, I hoped. I imagined her opening the tin, holding the photo, maybe showing it to her partner. "This is me and my dad." I imagined her smiling, not bitterly, but curiously, maybe even warmly. I imagined her replying with something simple. "Thank you." Or, "She has your eyes." Or even, "Would you like to meet her?" Instead, on the 4th day, I received a message, 10 words. "You only show up when you're lonely." No greeting, no punctuation, no dad, just the verdict. It knocked the wind out of me. I sat motionless for what felt like an hour, phone still glowing in my palm. There was no anger in her words, no exclamation points, just fact. Cold, plain, unforgiving. She'd seen the gift for what it was, Another appearance after too long a silence. And she wasn't wrong. I had shown up, emotionally, symbolically, only when I needed something. When I felt the void and tried to plug it with presence. She wasn't angry, she was done. And that, somehow, hurt more. There was no thanks. No, it's too late. No explanation. She didn't want one. She didn't owe me one. The photo I thought would reconnect us had only highlighted the distance. That image, us in the kitchen, laughing covered in flour, was a fossil. A record of something that once existed, but hadn't survived the erosion of time. I scrolled back and read the message again. 10 words. Each one a pin, pressing deeper. You only show up when you're lonely. It was her way of saying, I know this pattern. I've seen it before, and I won't let it happen again. And what stung the most? She was right. I hadn't built a bridge. I'd thrown a rope across a canyon and hoped she'd tug it back. But she'd stopped reaching long ago. And I was still standing on the edge, holding a frayed end, wondering why it went slack. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark cab of my truck, headlights off, phone screen black. I listened to the humming silence around me and realized something simple, cruel, and true. Some messages aren't meant to start a conversation. They're meant to end one. I hadn't spoken to Marianne in over a decade. She was Dana's best friend, had been since college, and during the early years of my marriage, we saw her often. She was loud, fiercely loyal, and never liked me much. Not because I was cruel, but because I was distant. She said I hid in silence when things got hard. She wasn't wrong. Still, after Lily's message, I couldn't stop thinking about the past. I needed to understand more, not just what I'd missed, but what Lily had carried all those years. Dana was gone. Lily wouldn't talk to me. Marianne was the last thread. I found her living in a small house on the edge of Eugene, Oregon. The lawn was overgrown, her mailbox leaning to one side. When she opened the door and saw me, she didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She squinted like trying to figure out if I was real. "Robert," she said flatly. "I just need 10 minutes," I said. She stared a beat longer, then stepped aside. "You've got 5. Her living room smelled like old books and lavender oil. A cat slept on the armrest of a torn recliner. She didn't offer me coffee. I didn't ask. "I came to ask about Lily," I said, voice low. She raised an eyebrow. 30 years late, but go on." "I know I failed her," I said. "I'm not here to deny that. I just want to understand what I missed, what I never saw." She studied me, arms crossed. "You're serious?" "I am." Without a word, she walked into the hallway. I heard a cabinet open, hinges creaking. When she returned, she carried a small metal box. Blue, rusted at the edges. She held it like it weighed more than it should. "She wrote these between 7 and 12, Marianne said. "Gave them to me after every birthday, holiday, dance recital. Said, maybe one day he'll read them. Dana wouldn't mail them. Said it'd just confuse her more." She placed the box in my lap. "She stopped writing around middle school," Marianne added. "Stopped talking about you altogether." My hands trembled as I opened the lid. Inside were envelopes, dozens, some pink, some white, all carefully folded, all addressed to Dad. The first one I opened was dated January 13th, 1998. "Dear Daddy, I missed you today. We had pancakes, but they weren't like yours. I told Mom I want to see you on my birthday. She said maybe. I drew a picture of us baking. I hope you like it." I unfolded the drawing tucked inside. Two stick figures, one with a mustache, both smiling over a stove. Another letter dated July 1999. Daddy, I got a medal in swim class. I pretended you were there. I waved at the bleachers, but you weren't there. Maybe next time? I read each one slowly, like peeling back layers of a wound I hadn't known was so deep. Each word carried longing. Each page soaked in innocence, confusion, hope. Then I found one sealed tighter than the rest. A red envelope, taped shut with childish determination. Don't open unless you're really my dad, it said on the front. I hesitated. My hands didn't feel steady enough, but I opened it. The handwriting inside was shakier, slanted. Dear Dad, I don't think you love me. Maybe you did once, but not anymore. Sometimes I think if I disappeared, you'd never notice. That maybe if I got sick or ran away, someone would tell you, and you'd care again. But I won't, because I don't want to be a problem. I just want to be your kid. Is that too much? There was no drawing in that one, just silence between the lines. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at Marianne. Her eyes had softened, just a bit. She never told anyone she wrote that, she said, not even me. I found it years later when she'd moved out. I clutched the letter like it might vanish. Like maybe, if I held it tightly enough, it would reverse time. She thought disappearing would make you notice, Marianne said gently. You don't come back from that, Robert. Not easily. I didn't respond. I couldn't. There are moments in a man's life when shame doesn't come as a shout, but a whisper. And that whisper crawled into my chest and settled there. All this time, I thought I'd been sparing her by staying away. Instead, I'd taught her absence meant she wasn't worth showing up for. I folded the letters gently. All of them. Put them back in the tin. Can I keep this? I asked. Marianne nodded once. As I left her house, the weight of that box in my hands was heavier than anything I'd ever hauled across state lines. Because it wasn't just metal or paper. It was everything I'd missed. Everything she'd waited for. Everything I'd failed to say. I didn't sleep that night. The box of letters sat beside me in the passenger seat of the truck, each envelope pressing on my chest like a confession too long buried. I kept replaying her words over and over. I just want to be your kid. Is that too much? Somewhere between shame and disbelief, I started to wonder if there had ever been a moment, just one, where I could have made a difference. A crack in the wall I never saw. A bridge I failed to walk across. That's when I thought about email. I'd had the same email address for nearly 2 decades. Never used it much beyond bank alerts and service confirmations. But I remembered, once, giving it to Dana during one of our final conversations. In case Lily ever wants to reach out, I'd said. It was past midnight. The truck was parked outside a closed diner in southern Oregon, and the only sounds were the ticking of my engine cooling off and the occasional screech of a distant train. I opened my laptop and logged in. Inbox, 4,112 unread messages. Most were junk. Subscriptions I never canceled. Promotions I never clicked. But something told me not to search the inbox. Instead, I clicked on the spam folder. It was an impulse, nothing more. But there, buried between a phishing scam and a cruise offer, was a sender I hadn't seen in years. Lily S. sent, 5 years ago. Subject, Hi, I don't know if this still works. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Hi, I don't know if this still works. Or if you even check it. I found it on an old document from when I was 12. I almost didn't write anything, but here I am. I don't really have anything dramatic to say. Just, I was walking today, And I passed a bakery that smelled like marshmallow cake. Remember that? I doubt you do, but it used to be my favorite. You brought one to my 9th birthday. Mom was mad, but I remember it. I don't want anything. Do you still have the same phone number? I think I need someone to listen, that's all. Lily. There were no attachments, no photos, no follow-up. Just a door opened 5 years ago and never acknowledged. I sat frozen for a full 5 minutes, the screen dimming as if ashamed. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly. 5 years ago, I was hauling freight through Arizona, I remembered. That week had been brutal. Long hours, blown tire, a heat wave that felt like punishment. I'd probably checked email from my phone, glanced at the junk folder, and never gave it a second thought. But it had been there, a thread, a signal, and I missed it. Not because I was cruel, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't look. I reopened the email and read it again, this time slower. The tone was soft, not angry, not desperate, just tired, lonely. She'd reached out not to accuse, but to connect, to say, I'm still thinking of you, even after everything. And I hadn't seen it. What might have happened if I'd replied? What would I have said? I imagined writing her back. I remember the cake. I remember your smile. I've missed you every day. Please, let me be here now. Would she have answered? Would it have changed anything? Or would it have been too late, even then? The worst part was knowing I'd never find out. I leaned back in the driver's seat, eyes closed, feeling a kind of grief I didn't have a name for. Not just regret. It was something deeper, like watching a flower bloom in a time-lapse video, only to realize it bloomed 5 years ago, and you missed it. I thought about the courage it must have taken her to write that message, to wonder, after everything, if maybe, just maybe, I might still care. She'd opened the door, and I didn't even knock. What broke me wasn't just the message. It was that she hadn't written again, because she'd learned what I taught her, unintentionally, that silence was the most reliable part of me, that if she asked for love, it wouldn't come, that if she dared to hope, it would hurt more. I wanted to scream, to punch the dashboard, to beg for one more chance. But there was no one to hear it. The internet doesn't care about your delayed revelations. Email servers don't preserve intention. The moment had passed. 5 years ago, she asked if I still had the same number. I did, and I said nothing. Now, I stared at my screen, the cursor blinking beneath her words, a taunting pulse of everything I'd lost. I considered writing her then, replying, even though the moment was gone. I hovered over the keyboard. Lily, I just saw this. I'm sorry. But I didn't hit send. Not yet. Because an apology that arrives too late isn't a bridge. It's an echo. And I didn't want to send another echo into the void she'd already learned to live without. I didn't write the email. Not the reply to Lily's message from 5 years ago. Not a fresh apology. Not even a single sentence. Because anything I wrote now would feel like it was for me, not her. And I didn't want more guilt disguised as outreach. I didn't want to knock on her door again with empty hands and a "look at me, I'm trying" expression. I'd done enough of that. What I hadn't done, not once in 3 decades, was sit still and take full responsibility without expecting a return. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, the only thing I could control. I wrote, not a message, not a letter, but a manuscript. I called it, "To My Daughter, I Wasn't There, but I Remember Everything." It wasn't neat. It wasn't polished. It was raw. Pages filled with decades of silence cracked open. Moment by moment. Memory by memory. I wrote about the night I missed her kindergarten graduation because my truck broke down in Utah, and I didn't call to explain. I wrote about the way her voice used to lilt upward when she said, "Daddy," before it flattened into "Dad," then disappeared altogether. I wrote about the 9th birthday cake she never got to eat, the ballet recitals I watched from afar, parked across the street in my truck like a coward, afraid to be seen but desperate to be near. I wrote about the tin box, the letters, the spam folder, the unopened opportunities I'd let rot in the shadow of shame. But more than anything, I wrote about her. How much I admired her strength. How proud I was of the woman she became without me. How I'd memorized every smile from every photo, even if I wasn't the one behind the camera. And I didn't write with an agenda. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't beg for a meeting. I didn't promise anything. I just told the truth. When I finished, I printed it, bound the pages with a black binder clip. No cover, no formatting, just 87 pages of unedited confession. Then I mailed it to the publisher listed on the inside flap of one of Lily's books. No name on the return address. No note. Just a signature on the last page. From Dad, the one who wasn't there but never forgot. I didn't expect a response. I didn't even know if she'd see it. She was an author. It could get tossed aside in a submissions pile, or passed over by a junior assistant, or buried in slush. But something about putting it in the mailbox, dropping it through that blue slot, and hearing the metal clink shut, felt different than anything I'd done before. It wasn't a cry for attention. It was an offering. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Silence. I told myself I was okay with that the purpose wasn't the outcome, it was the act. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't check my email more often, or linger on the phone a second longer, waiting for it to buzz. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, I got a call. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hello? Is this Robert Stanton?" The voice was young, polite, female. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name's Beth. I work at..." She named the publishing house. "You submitted a manuscript, or someone submitted it on your behalf?" I stayed quiet. "I just wanted to let you know. It's been circulating here, internally." Circulating? Yeah, people are passing it around. Editors, assistants, even the CEO's assistant printed a copy. We're honestly kind of stunned. It's raw. Honest. It's not something we'd normally publish, but it's hitting people. I didn't know what to say. Beth continued. "No one knows who wrote it. You didn't leave any contact info except this number. But someone in the office thinks it might be about Lily Stanton. The author?" I paused. My chest tightened. "Yes," I said. "She's my daughter." Beth hesitated. "Does she know you wrote it?" "No," I said quietly. "And I don't want her to. Not unless she wants to know." Beth was silent for a moment, then said, "I think you should know. She hasn't read it. Yet. But people are talking. People who work with her. She might find out soon." I thanked her, hung up. Then I sat in my truck for a long time. The irony wasn't lost on me. All my failed attempts to reach her. Cards, messages, gifts. And now, the one thing I didn't sign with my full name. The one thing I expected nothing from. That was the thing getting through. Twist of fate? Maybe. Or maybe finally I'd said something real, without asking for something in return. No email came, no phone call, no letter, not even an anonymous message. After Beth's call from the publishing house, I waited. Not expectantly, just with breath half held. I told myself I wasn't hoping. I told myself this wasn't another test of whether I'd get through. But every morning, I still checked my phone before I got out of bed. Every night, I stared at the screen before closing my eyes. Silence. That was her reply. And for the first time, I accepted it as an answer, not a punishment. She didn't owe me words. She didn't owe me anything. Still, the silence stung, like pressing your palm against the stove after someone warned you it was hot. You want to feel brave, but all you get is burned. I was delivering flooring materials through Seattle when I saw the title trending, Lily's new short story, posted on a literary website. A surprise drop, no prior announcement. It was called The Father Beneath the Rain Awning. I almost didn't click. My heart pounded before I'd even read a word. But I clicked, and I read. It began with a father, middle-aged, tired, described as the kind of man who keeps secrets from himself because they're too painful to say aloud. He stands outside a house in the rain, holding a gift wrapped in a soaked paper bag. He waits. 2 hours pass, then 3. He never knocks, never calls. He just waits. Through the window, he watches a girl laughing inside. She doesn't see him, or maybe she does, and chooses not to react. He's not sure. He thinks about leaving. But the rain becomes an excuse to stay. And the longer he waits, the heavier the bag becomes, not because of the weight, but because of everything it represents. And then comes the part that gutted me. The story shifts to the girl inside. She sees him. She watches from the hallway mirror, just out of sight. She knows he's there. She remembers the last time he left. Remembers that birthdays are quieter without expectation, that it's easier to live without a father than to keep mourning one who still breathes. But still, she watches. She wants to open the door. She rehearses it in her head. How she'd smile, what she'd say. Maybe she'd mention the cake, or the storybook he once read exactly once before disappearing again. But the fear of another silence stops her. She waits too long. When she finally opens the door, stepping barefoot into the rain, he's gone. The bag is there, collapsed, the gift inside ruined by water. She lifts it, cradles it, and whispers, "Too late." I stared at the screen for 10 full minutes after finishing it. It wasn't signed with her usual tone. No clever twist. No metaphor to soften the truth. Just two people, separated by years of unsaid things, each too afraid to bridge the final inch between them. People in the comments were moved. They called it poetic, haunting, brilliant. Some debated whether the father was a metaphor for grief, or if the story was about forgiveness. But I knew better. It wasn't metaphor. It wasn't fiction. It was memory, dressed in prose. That awning, that was mine. That rain, I remembered it. Portland, 3 years ago. I had driven through the night after hearing from a distant family member that Lily would be home for her birthday. I hadn't planned to stop, hadn't called. I just showed up. Again. I stood outside her gate with a cake in one hand and an envelope in the other. I waited under the porch covering, watched the lights flicker through the window, listened to the sound of laughter muffled by walls I hadn't earned my way through. I didn't knock. I waited until the streetlights flickered on. Then I placed the gift on the doorstep and left. I never knew if she saw me. Until now. Now, I did. It wasn't anger in her story. That's what surprised me. It wasn't an accusation or a plea. It was an autopsy, a quiet dissection of a relationship that had died from malnutrition, not abuse, not betrayal, just starvation of presence. And the twist, the one I hadn't been ready for, wasn't that she'd seen me that night. It was that she'd almost opened the door. Almost. But almost isn't a bridge. It's a cliff. And I had taught her to stay back from the edge. That was my legacy. A pattern so familiar, she'd rather let the moment pass than risk it hurting again. And yet, she wrote it. She shared it. Not in a diary. Not in a hidden drawer. But with the world. With me. It wasn't a phone call, but it was a reply. And in its silence, I finally heard her. I stopped trying to reach her. Not because I gave up, but because I finally understood that healing doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means learning how to live with the space someone left behind without trying to fill it with noise. So I turned inward. It started with a small flyer taped to the corkboard of a truck stop in Eugene. Looking for volunteers, fatherhood support group, help needed, real men, real stories. I took a photo of the number, deleted it, took it again 2 days later. Then I called. The center was tucked behind an old church building, barely large enough for the circle of chairs they set up every Wednesday night. Most of the guys there were younger, 20s, maybe early 30s. Some had kids they saw every weekend. Others were fighting for visitation. A few hadn't met their child yet. The first night I came, I just listened. They spoke about fear, about messing up, about wanting to be better than their own dads. One guy, Reggie, said, "I didn't grow up with a dad, and I swore I'd do it different. But man, sometimes I think I'm just following the same map." That hit hard, because I never had a map either. My father was stern, silent, and present in body only. I inherited that silence like a family heirloom and passed it down without knowing. The second week, I spoke. I didn't mention Lily by name. I said, I was a dad. I wasn't a present one. I missed most things, and I thought if I paid the bills, that made up for it. A few nodded. "I'm not here to be forgiven," I added. "I'm here to help you not end up like me." That's when things changed. Someone asked me to stay after the meeting and share more. Then someone else said, "You should write that down." So I did. I started a blog, anonymous at first, called The Absentee Seat. Every post was a letter I'd never sent, not just to Lily, but to all the kids like her. To the dads who needed someone to say, "Yes, you're scared. Yes, you'll mess up. Show up anyway." Some posts got a handful of views. Others, somehow, went semi-viral. One titled, "You don't get to come back, but you can show up somewhere else," was shared by a teacher in Chicago who said she made her students read it aloud. A therapist from Iowa reached out, asked if she could use one of my letters in a grief workshop. I started recording short podcast episodes, just my voice, raw and unedited. No intro music, no sponsors, just me, talking about shame, fatherhood, silence, and how time isn't a savior. It's just a mirror. The emails came slowly at first, then faster. A 17-year-old girl from Boston wrote, "My dad left when I was 5. He came back last year and I didn't open the door. I thought I was a monster. But now, I think maybe I was just protecting myself." A young father in Atlanta messaged, "My son is 2. I'm terrified. But I listened to your episode on birthdays, and I swear I'm going to be there for everyone." I responded to every message, carefully, quietly, like whispering in a dark room, hoping someone heard. I never mentioned Lily. Not once. But every word I wrote, every letter I answered, every story I shared was for her. It was my apology, carved into code and uploaded into a space where maybe, someday, she might stumble across it. Or maybe not. Maybe it was enough that someone else's daughter might hear her father speak more honestly because of me. Maybe that was the kind of legacy I could live with. One afternoon, I sat in the support group, now held outdoors under a crooked tent, and watched a young man cradle his newborn daughter. He was barely 20, still trembling with the weight of it all. He asked me, "What if I mess her up?" I said, "You will. We all do. But if you're there, if you stay, she'll know the difference between a mistake and abandonment." He nodded, eyes wet. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something right, not to erase the past, but to build something better in its shadow. It was a Thursday night when I recorded it. The sky outside the truck cab was black, starless. The highway was quiet. My route finished early for once. I'd parked behind a gas station just outside Boise, and for a few hours I had the world to myself. No script, no outline, just a voice recorder and everything I hadn't said out loud. I titled the episode, "The Letter I Never Saw in Time," and I began. I want to tell you about something I found too late. It was buried in a spam folder, somewhere between a bank scam and an expired coupon. It was from my daughter. She didn't know if I'd ever read it. She asked a simple question. "Do you still have the same phone number? I think I need someone to listen." I paused then, staring into the dark, and I never saw it. For 5 years. I never saw it because I didn't look. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like water breaching a dam. I talked about shame, about what it means to build walls around your failures and pretend they're strength. I talked about how I used to believe silence was safer than messing up again. But silence doesn't keep people safe, I said into the microphone. It just teaches them not to expect anything from you. By the time I finished, I didn't feel lighter, but I felt honest. I uploaded the episode, closed my laptop, went to sleep. 2 days passed. The usual listeners downloaded it. Some shared it. One father emailed to say it helped him call his teenage son for the first time in months. But then came the comment. It showed up on the public feed under the episode description. No profile picture, no name. Just a gray silhouette. The username was WindedWindow86, and the message read, "I cried when I heard this, and so did she." That was all. No context, no elaboration. Just that. I read it 5 times, each time slower, and so did she. Something about the phrasing. It clung to me. Not just the words, but the timing, the precision. It wasn't written like a fan comment. It was written like a signal. I didn't respond. I didn't ask for clarification. But I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I followed a hunch. I searched the username. Found nothing. No digital trail. It looked like a ghost account, created for one moment, one sentence. So I dug into the IP data from the comment backend. The site I hosted the podcast on allowed admin-level viewing for moderators. It wasn't much, but it gave me a general location. Manhattan. I already knew Lily's publisher was based there. I kept quiet. But a week later, the second comment came. This time in a direct message. Same account. Same voice. "You wrote that for her. Even if she never tells you, she heard it." That was the moment I knew. It wasn't Lily, but it was someone close. Still, I didn't push. I didn't reply. I just posted another episode, this time titled, "Sometimes You Don't Deserve Closure. Show Up." Anyway, 3 weeks passed before I learned who it was. I got a phone call from Beth, the same editorial assistant who'd contacted me about the manuscript. Her voice had the same warm directness, but this time there was something else, a kind of hush beneath her words. "I shouldn't be calling," she said, "but I thought you deserved to know." I didn't speak, just waited. "You got a comment on your podcast," she said. "Anonymous. Winded Window 86?" I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "That's Margot," she continued. "Lily's editor. Her closest one. They've worked together for 6 years." My throat tightened. "She listens to your episodes, on her breaks. In her office, sometimes with Lily. I've walked in on them twice. They never say it's yours. But they don't turn it off when I enter. They just sit there, quiet." I didn't know what to say. "She's not reaching out directly," Beth added, "but she's listening. And Margot, she's helping her listen safely." That was the twist. I wasn't speaking to Lily, but someone was listening on her behalf. Someone who cared enough to translate my silence into something less frightening. Someone who stood in the space between us, not to block the way, but to keep it from collapsing altogether. For so many years, I'd been the only voice trying to cross the distance. And now, for the first time, someone echoed back. Not with forgiveness, but with acknowledgement. That mattered more than I expected, because for years, I thought healing meant standing face to face and saying the perfect words. But maybe healing sometimes means this: a third party, a quiet intermediary, passing messages between two people who aren't ready to speak, but aren't ready to stop trying either. Margot didn't owe me anything, but she gave me something I didn't know how to ask for. Hope, refracted, filtered through someone Lily trusted, and for the first time in a long, long while, I believed there was still space for something to grow, quietly, in the dark. It had been exactly 1 month since the anonymous message. The podcast episode that followed hadn't been about Lily, not directly. I'd spoken about time, how it doesn't heal wounds, it just makes them quieter. I talked about how you can go years thinking you've buried something, only to realize it's been growing roots underneath your entire life. And then, nothing. No new messages, no calls, no updates from Beth. The quiet had returned, and I tried to accept it as enough. Then came the text. It arrived mid-morning, just as I pulled into a rest stop outside of Tacoma. I checked my phone like I always did. Habit more than hope, and there it was. A number I hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. "If you're still in town, dinner?" 7 words. No greeting. No punctuation. No emojis. But everything about it was unmistakably hers. My breath caught in my chest. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was unsure how to respond, but because I was terrified of what came next. Was it real? Was it a mistake? Was it a peace offering or a farewell? I didn't ask. I simply replied, yes. She sent an address, a quiet neighborhood near Portland, a time, 6:30. No more words. I didn't tell anyone. Not Beth. Not the guys at the Fatherhood Center. I packed up my truck, booked a small motel room for the night, and changed into the only clean button-down shirt I owned. I didn't bring flowers. I didn't stop for gifts. But I did bring something. A small, leather-bound notebook I'd been carrying since the day I started the blog. Inside were a few hundred pages, notes, unsent letters, fragments of thoughts scribbled at truck stops and parking lots. I flipped to the first page and wrote 3 lines. Lily, I was wrong. I missed you. I'm here now. I closed it, slid it into my coat pocket, and drove. The house was modest, painted light gray with a small porch and a porch swing. There were potted plants by the door, lavender, I think, and a child's bike leaning against the fence. I sat in the car for a full minute, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. My heart thudded like it had when I was 25, waiting outside the delivery room. Finally, I got out. I didn't rehearse what to say. I didn't make a list of topics. I walked up to the door, notebook in hand, and knocked. No answer at first. Then the door opened. Slow, careful. Lily stood there, framed in the doorway like a portrait I'd never finished painting. Her hair was pulled back. She wore a simple sweater, no makeup, no expression I could read clearly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped aside. "Come in," she said. Just that. The living room was warm, lived in. Toys were scattered on a carpet. A faint smell of roasted vegetables hung in the air. Somewhere in the back, a child laughed. "Thank you," I said, voice rougher than I expected. She nodded once. "Dinner's almost ready." We sat at the table. She poured water. Set 2 plates. No candles, no music. Just the clink of silverware and the hum of an old refrigerator. I placed the notebook beside my plate, gently. "I didn't bring anything else," I said. "Just this. You don't have to read it now. Or ever." She glanced at it but didn't touch it. We ate. The food was good. Roasted carrots, chicken, something with lentils. She asked if I still drove trucks. I asked if she still wrote by hand before typing. We didn't mention the past, not yet, not directly. But in the way we spoke, in the way we didn't flinch at silence, it was there. The weight, the history, the ache. After dinner, she cleared the plates. I offered to help. She declined. Then, as I stood to leave, she said, "Would you like to meet her?" I turned. "My daughter," she added. "She's in her room, drawing." I swallowed. "I'd love that," I said. She nodded, walked down the hall. I waited by the door, unsure if this was real or some echo of a life I didn't earn. Then a little girl appeared, dark hair, curious eyes, holding a piece of paper with squiggles that might have been a horse. She looked at me, then at the notebook in my hand. "Are you Mommy's dad?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, I am." She smiled, tooth missing in the front. "Do you draw too?" I smiled back. "I used to," I said, "but I could use a teacher." The meal ended as quietly as it began. There were no grand speeches, no tearful apologies, no dramatic reconciliations, just the clink of silverware, the occasional question, the kind of soft conversation that exists when people are learning how to speak to each other again. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. Not about missed birthdays or unread letters. Not about the nights she waited by the phone or the cake I left in the rain. Instead, we talked about small things. Her writing, my podcast, the way her daughter loved drawing trees with purple leaves. And sometimes silence filled the space between our words. But for once, it didn't feel like something broken. It felt like breathing. When the plates were cleared and the last bite was gone, I remained seated, unsure of what came next. Lily stood by the sink, rinsing a glass. I watched her for a moment, taking in the simple rhythm of her movements. For years, I'd imagined her life in fragments, through photos, secondhand stories, guesswork. But here she was, in front of me, whole. "You didn't ask why I finally texted," she said without turning. I looked down at the table. "No," I said. "I figured if you wanted me to know, you'd tell me." She dried her hands. "I didn't plan to. It just felt less exhausting than staying angry." I nodded. "Anger's heavy." She turned, leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not done being angry," she added. "I don't think I'll ever be. Not completely. I wouldn't expect you to be." Her expression softened, barely. "But I'm also tired of pretending you don't exist." That landed deeper than anything else that night. Not because it hurt, but because it was true. She hadn't forgiven me. Not really. But she was letting me exist in her world again. That was something. That was everything. I reached into my coat and slid the small notebook across the table. "I meant it when I said you didn't have to read this," I told her. "But if one day you want to know the version of me that tried to understand, he's in here." She looked at it for a long moment, didn't touch it. Then she asked, "Does she like sweets?" I blinked. "Your daughter?" She nodded. I smiled. "I was going to ask you the same thing." That made her laugh. Not loud, just enough. "She's obsessed with baking shows," Lily said. "Watches them like other kids watch cartoons." "Smart kid," I said. "She's got good taste." A few seconds passed. Then I asked it, "Do you think she'd want to make something with me sometime? Just cookies or a cake or whatever she likes?" Lily hesitated, but not long. "I think she'd love that." That one word, think, was enough. It held space. It didn't promise too much, but it didn't shut the door either. Just then, the little girl came back into the room, holding something in her hands. It was small, round, metal. She walked right up to me and held it out with pride. "This is mine," she said. "But Mommy said it used to be yours." I stared at it. A blue tin box, dented, faded around the edges. The very same one I had mailed after hearing Lily had given birth. I hadn't expected it to survive. I hadn't expected it to matter. But it had. She opened the lid. Inside was the photo. The one of Lily and me in the kitchen, stirring batter, flour on her nose, my hand steadying the bowl. The girl pointed at the picture. "That's Mommy," she said. "And that's you?" I nodded. "Mommy said you used to make the best marshmallow cake in the world." My throat tightened. "I tried," I said. "Once." She beamed. "Can we make it again, someday?" I glanced at Lily. She had turned away, pretending to fix a placemat that didn't need fixing. But I saw it. The way her shoulder shifted. The way her head dipped slightly forward. She was smiling, not broadly, not with abandon, but genuinely, quietly, the kind of smile people give when something inside them begins to thaw. The girl climbed onto the chair next to me, placing the tin between us. "Mommy said I should keep this," she whispered, "to remember." "Remember what?" I asked gently. She paused. "That people come back." And there it was, the ending I never expected. Not perfect, not wrapped in a bow, not washed clean of everything we'd been through, but real, solid, true. We didn't take a photo that night. There was no need. That moment was already pressed into memory, like ink on skin. And as I left the house, hug brief, eyes wet but not spilling, I carried no promises. Just the weight of a tin box, returned, and the hope that sometimes the past can sit at the same table as the present and not break it.